That's one of the things support system is. It's a mirror. If you pay attention, we will reflect back things that may be a problem, but we also reflect back. And this is very often for a lot of people in this program pursuing emotional sobriety. We're also going to reflect back what you're doing right, what you're doing that's good, what you're doing is solid. Beware of false humility, beware of overconfidence. But as you become competent about anything, there is not only a right, but a responsibility to feel confident.
Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
I heard you use a term the other day, Alan. You said the next frontier, which I think was Bill Wilson said. Isn't that from Bill Wilson?
That's how they labeled Bill's Grapevine article. Emotional sobriety, the next frontier.
I like that better than the next step. It's like because this is more than just a step.
Bill Wilson was a wordsmith. So listen to So there's two definitions. The second one says the extreme limit of understanding or achievement in a particular area.
All right. The outer edge, then, basically.
The extreme limit of your achievement. It fits, right?
Yeah. And the next frontier also implies that there will be another extreme limit. It's just like what we talk about with space travel. It's like anybody who thinks that we're anywhere close to, we pretty much know everything we're going to know. No.
Well, the cornerstone of my understanding of recovery is that the addiction is just it's an expression of a deeper issue, and emotional sobriety is a way of addressing the underlying causes of our malady, and that makes sense why it would be the frontier, because it's kind of like the last thing and the most important thing that many of us get to as we try to unfuck ourselves, right?
Right. Well, in terms of, and I think, I don't know if we should use so much clinical jargon as unfuck ourselves, but it's like, I don't want to be talking over people's heads. But it's the way you just said that though, Patrick, it's like, it's the kind of thing that just fascinates me with word, like what you're saying with words, Alan, is the idea that it's how do you get sober? Well, you deal with these underlying issues. What are we dealing with these? What are we dealing with our addictions for in the first place? So we can actually finally deal with these underlying issues. It goes both directions. It goes in all directions, and it's like but because I always say that the getting sober, and we're going to talk about support systems today. So this may be a good segue in. It's getting sober is like lifting the hood of the car so you have access to the engine. It's like I tell because you hear that all the time. People say, well, is it? Some people say, well, no, it's not about. If you're talking about alcoholism or drug addiction, they go like, it's not about the drugs, And then, of course, is it about the drugs? Yep. I work with eating disorders. Is it about food? No, it's not ultimately about the food at all. It's like, is it about food? It certainly is. Both of those things exist. And so the way I finally put it together for myself to be able to hand it over to some folks I'm working with is no, if we're working on the engine of a car, we got to get the hood propped up first. And if we're in there working on it and the hood comes slamming down on our heads, we don't just keep working. The priority, once again, prop that hood up to be sure that we have access. And that's what that does. It is absolutely essential, but it's not, it's far from the last frontier.
It's not the end of the conversation.
No, it's the beginning. It really is the beginning. And we're going to talk about a support system today. It's, and one of the main things that we've all had to come to grips with, every one of us who are in any kind of decent recovery, and that people who are still coming into this now have to deal with, is that and it kind of goes against a lot of the things we've been taught we're supposed to be able to do, but not one of us can do this alone.
That's right. Before we jump into that, I'm sitting here smiling when Patrick was talking about, putting this into context, right? Because you couldn't have articulated that like you did 2 years ago, Patrick. And it just shows how much you're learning. Right before our audience's eyes, they see you evolving in more and more the direction of emotional sobriety. So we didn't tell you this, but you are our test subject.
I'm the test chimp.
You are the test. It's like B.F. Skinner when he had a baby, decided he'd do all these experiments on his kid. I mean, it was really funny. Funny, but it also got a lot of protests in psychology. What are you doing? That kid can't give you said. No, but all joking aside, your growth and evolution is obvious.
Thanks so much, Allen. The way that I come to support systems is, this show is it's a job I do, and it's a thing I collaborate with you guys in creating. And, our audience is a part of it. And, I'm very serious about this work. But at the same time, this is a support system of sorts that keeps me not only accountable to the work, but connected to these issues of recovery and mental health, and keeps me questioning, and keeps me around like a kind of a source of energy that reminds me what I'm doing. Because I think that like a refrain, I'm even if I'm not hearing it articulated directly, but I'm seeing it whenever I connect to people like you, or like the constellation of people that come to the meetings or listen to the podcast, it's you can't think your way to right action. You have to act your way to right thinking. It's you start with the behavior, and then the behavior works backwards into your mind, and then that's how change is possible. Because I feel like my mind is a nest of just tangled wires, and I've got a lot of bad feeling and depression and anxiety, and just like if I'm start from my mind, I'm really not in a good place. But if I can get a practice together, that's what Herb Kagan's always talking about. Those who have a practice work the practice. And so this support system is a way of kind of keeping me in touch with all that, and it gives me an opportunity to build it and work it. So that's kind of where I think about it.
Wow. Making your point for you there, Allen, because spoken like a true veteran of recovery. Right. What you're saying, following every little thing you're saying, going, good way to put that. And it's like, and when I was thinking about doing the support system thing, I was thinking about like just the idea that it's one of those things that too often we can easily, those of us who've been doing this for a long time, can easily just kind of toss out there and say, by the way, don't forget, to maintain that support system. And you go like, well, wait a minute, and then this is one of the good things about working with people, individually, on the front lines too. You get to be reminded on a daily basis that stuff doesn't have the same meaning it does to somebody who has a history with this. So, I'm taken by the idea of maybe launching this conversation off in a way by using our 3-man support system. There's you have multiple support systems. It's not just one thing. It's not just, okay, this 12-step program or this, my family, whatever, but the three of us have referred to what we do here with the podcast as a support system many times. And, and it's like, I think it's been understood and a shared perception from us that we do really all experience this as a part of our recovery, our support. Something we're doing as part of our work, but it's like it's more than that. And I didn't know Patrick at all when we started, so I didn't know anything about him other than you recommended him for this work. And so I did by reference, hearing references, I understood that he was one of us. He was in recovery. I didn't know that you guys had a history together with this stuff. I didn't know, I didn't know if you, how long you'd been in recovery or not, Patrick. It's like, I just came into that. And, And Alan, and what I've learned is your perception is very different from mine. You have this whole history with Patrick. So if we use you as the point of reference, Patrick. So you have two of us who, as individual recovering, people and professional helpers, we have a lot in common, but we had two entirely different approaches to you. I mean, for me, it's like I have initially approached you just as if you were anybody else in my recovery network and do this stuff. And I want to say to you is, because you have been so open and vulnerable about your questions and sharing things about yourself as you go along, sometimes on the air and sometimes just with us, it's like that has proven to be my validation that I was correct to just approach you as a recovering person, just like I do with Alan. Because one of the things I like to say within recovery support systems is, I heard it, you hear it in the old guys in AA that say this stuff, that we roll our eyes at sometimes, but they're really wise. And it's like, the people talking about how long people have so in the program, I like the guy that says, whoever got up first this morning has the most sobriety today. And that's it. And I've told people before, it's like you and I, you may have only been sober for 2 weeks, but you and I, if we're both working our program, we're both equally in recovery. We're both equally sober. It really isn't about seniority. There's nothing disingenuous about that. I don't think, coming from anybody who's saying that. That's just where you are doing it. You're doing that stuff. I was there a minute, it feels like a minute ago and a minute from now. And it's not, and I'm a big believer in terms of when we're talking with people in terms of support, false humility gets on my nerves big time. People, you kind of get to feel it. So I always want to be sure that, when I'm talking about the idea that no, I could be back in my shit in no time flat, that kind of stuff. That's not just saying something just, won't I sound humble when I say that? It's like, no, this is the recovery. I mean, yeah, it believe me, to not have had a drink for this many years makes this easier, a lot easier. It's like, there's a lot of things about that. I haven't ever been diagnosed with an eating disorder. It's, I live in this culture of ours. So I do believe I have experienced disordered eating, because I think we live in an eating disordered culture. I look at the people I work with who recover from eating disorders. I go like, I tell them I prefer my addiction over yours, because I love the fact that mine is so cut and dried. It's like, there's just shit I just don't do, and it's just, if I find a antihistamine that helps me clear my head, but it also gives me a little buzz and I enjoy it, I can't have it. That's what support system is. A lot of times it's a place where we rat ourselves out. These are the people that you trust to tell on yourself about you, not just because you're getting ready to tip over into the behavior. You need to be there for sure, but it's just kind of helping people manage your thinking.
Right. Don't create a pool of darkness where like the thing can hide and like start to override you and control you. And I mean, that's what part of the what you call the vulnerability, or kind of like the honesty, and just kind of wearing it on your sleeve in the most effective way possible. What
you just said about the darkness is such a beautiful image for me. It's like, so each of us has a flashlight. And so yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, I'm realizing some pretty toxic thinking going on in my head. It's like, that may not be, I'm not buying into it even, but that's the thing about using support system. I would always want to make a point. Don't think support systems are there for emergencies. Support systems are there for the day to day. And so if I have some the old stinking thinking going on in there, and I'm talking to one of you, or I need to make an effort to talk to one of you, it's like the image I had with what you said is I shine my flashlight over there in that dark corner and go, hey, Alan, Patrick, look what I found this morning. Look at this guy telling me this shit. Yeah. And it's like the support may be no more than just going like, oh yeah, I got 3 of those, and 2 of them were talking to me last week. I go, good. I'm not, what's the most important thing about support system? We're not alone.
Right. Well, I want to kind of turn the light and shed light on another aspect of this, which has to do with support systems. It's very interesting because what's likely to happen, and I think, Tom, if you look back, you can see you probably went through this, and Patrick, you may have gone through some of this, and you will go through this, is one of the things that takes place. And this is an opportunity to practice these principles of emotional sobriety, because what we talk about is identifying patterns and habits. So first of all, that's very important to think about. It doesn't just happen to you. It's a relationship that you develop, right, with your support system. Well, what will eventually happen is you will start to recapitulate some of the same themes that occurred in your family of origin. Those issues now will begin to surface, and you'll start having reactions like, well, God, do they really care about me? I mean, am I really important here? Does anybody really care about how I feel about something? Am I being seen or not being seen? I mean, all of those wounds, all of those issues that you had in your family of origin will surface in your support system. Now, hopefully, as they are surfacing, because now in emotional sobriety, we're cultivating our awareness of what's going on for us. So when I start to feel disturbed, instead of just blaming the group and saying, look at this, shitty group I'm in and how they function, you're going to go, how is what's going on now? Or how does this remind me of what went on in my family?
What is familiar? It's a great question. The big question, what is familiar about this? Yeah.
So I just want to point out that as wonderful as support systems are, do not think that you're in a sanctuary where things aren't going to surface, because you aren't. Even in a sanctuary, things are going to surface, right? Because that's how we're designed, right? We are designed to always look at what's next, and what's next is finishing unfinished business. And we're going to carry a lot of unfinished business with us into our support systems. So the relationship you have with your support system will definitely be filtered through the lens that was ground in your experiences growing up.
Absolutely. Well, and one of the things you're saying, that I really appreciate you saying that too, because people who are new at this in this stuff, and I remember, and you probably could go with this also, Alan. I remember when I first went to, I mean, way back in the last century, when we were going to those we were doing those really deep experiential group things. We go off for a week with people and get into the, and just tears and gut wrenching sobs and just snot flying everywhere. It's like it was, and it was, I mean, it was just, we were just fucking just surrounded with love and all this stuff. And it's like, and so, and it's powerful, but the idea is just like any other relationship, you go into this honeymoon period where you see, first of all, you're just, it's just beautiful, but it's like, absolutely, just like any other relationship where you're going like, oh, this is all wonderful. And of course, one of the things people don't get about just relationship work a lot of times, if you get into a new relationship, I always call this part of God's lousy sense of humor, but the second phase after the honeymoon is usually referred to as storming. It's like, why do we go directly there? But that's the phase where you're, where the person who just said, oh, I love him, he's the most laid back person in the world, and then you talk to him a few months later and they say like, if that motherfucker is late one more time, I'm going, it's like, oh, we're talking about the same characteristic, but it's different. So, and what's changing is our stuff is coming up. Not that person hasn't transformed, but it's like, it's so cool and a long way around the block to do this. But what I set out to say was, thank you for bringing that part up, because that's where, the support system and the individual relationships in the support system really are the laboratory.
I thought I would ask because my conception of emotional sobriety, you're not relying on what others think about you to form your foundation of well-being and stability, in this recovery context. So how do you, I guess I'm trying to articulate, how do you stay connected?
Before you go there, see, think of that as that's aspirational, what you just said.
Yeah.
It's probably unrealistic, but it's aspirational.
Mm-hmm.
And meaning that it's what we aspire to, right? We want to try to get to the point where we're not defined by what other people are doing, right? That we keep our own sense of ourself, right? That we have a clarity about who we are. So what other people are doing don't define us. We kind of let go of what's called a reflected sense of self, meaning that myself is reflected in the other person's behavior. No, who I am is when I differentiate myself from them is independent from what they're doing. I am I and you are you. It's that kind of a thing. But go on now. So, but just
no, a differentiated. I'm glad you brought that term back up because I guess that's what I'm getting at. It's because I believe strongly in having a support system that you're accountable to and people that you are of service to and are emotionally kind of you're transparent and forthright about how you're feeling.
Let's go on with that. See, so look, what's going to happen, right, in our support system is there's going to be a certain amount of undifferentiated behavior, right? You've seen it. You've experienced some of that, like with the COVID stuff that was going on in terms of people bringing in issues about that. I mean, if you read some of the AA grapevines, they talk about, bringing outside issues into the meetings. How do you handle this? What goes on with this stuff? Because our traditions, right? The traditions are these guidelines to try to help us not get lost in our personalities. And the way I would say it, to help us not let being undifferentiated decide how the group's going to function and keep the group functioning at a higher level, right? That's what I see the traditions as doing. They keep calling us to the best in us, right? That's what they keep doing, right? AA unity comes first. Let's say that's an example of it, right? It's that kind of thing. Look, we're all on the same page. We're all there because we're suffering and we want to find a solution. That's the thing. Those are the things that if you're having trouble with another person and you're struggling with your differences, try to find where you're on the same page. It's a good way to go forward. So all of these interventions from the 12 traditions are to try to help the group function in the best way possible. But it doesn't mean that the group's going to function in the best way possible. No. There's still going to be stuff that goes on. There's going to be clips and people talking and people, telling people, I don't think you want to get well. See, one of the things that drives me crazy is when people start crossing lines like, well, I don't think you should take that antidepressant medication. When did you get your medical degree in your fellowship and your residency in psychiatry? I mean, wait a minute. Or giving it marital advice. AA is not marital therapy. There's all these things that happen in the group. And how do people give advice? Based on who they are, what they think is true. I'm not saying they're bad for doing that, but if we go back to the humility, wow, is this something that I really should be given an opinion about? Is this something I really know about and that I'm speaking from a sense of that this can be a helpful thing for a person? Well, I don't think so at times.
Okay, you brought up this is I love this conversation because you brought up a couple of big things about this. First of all, it's about expectations. Before I forget this piece, I'm going to say what you just said about being part of the group. That's one of the most important things to know, that when you're moving into a support group, whether that be a formal support group like AA meeting, or whether it be a group like we're an informal support system, it's like it's, you know, it's very always important, like any other relationship, to check your expectations, because first of all, most people coming into a support group, you know, we're beat up. You know, our self-esteem is at low, and what are we in danger of? We're in danger of putting people on pedestals. We're in danger of thinking the person, you know, has the answers, smarter than we are, that kind of stuff too. So we can judge them partially. I certainly could always do that, because that was a great defense for me, but I could also make the mistake of giving them my power by saying, no, this person or this group has all the answers. And so what you're talking about is just being realistic about the fact that, no, you're getting ready to run into some real, and we do use that term a lot, opportunities to grow in relationship, because these are going to be about relationships in which we're really, when you talk about the aspirations, what other people think of me does not define me. That doesn't mean I don't care what other people think of me. It's like, it doesn't, and it doesn't even mean that it doesn't matter. I mean, because one of my little nutshells says, which I think is a very important one, says, I respect your opinion, I trust my judgment. You know, that's bringing the defense down. That's saying because if I don't, you know, if I'm so defensive, I won't even hear what you have to say, because I know that you're seeing something different than I do. But I may hear what you have to say and think, well, you know, I think there's some truth to that, but not entirely. Or I may think, well, I don't agree with that, so I'm going to go on and do it the way I want to do it. But the bigger piece, one of the most important pieces, is just to understand. This is about compassion. Understand that the other people in our support world, in our support system, and the truth is, as we move through this stuff, we do find ourselves in relationships with what, you know, on a continuum, a healthier bunch of people, because we have a bunch of people who are seekers. We're all working on this together, trying to get better. But I'll just go to an example with my first sponsor. When I came from an early meeting one time in my recovery and said, I said, those guys are full of shit. I said, that's crazy. And he just started laughing, like he often did when I was talking. It's like and he just said, it's a room full of alcoholics, Tom. He said, of course they're full of shit.
Yeah, let's check those expectations.
Yeah, and it's like it ultimately wasn't that there wasn't some real serious wisdom in there, because there was, you know. Well, as a matter of fact, one of the challenges he gave me in that very same conversation was do you want to judge that person who said that, or do you want to actually listen to what he has to say? Because it was somebody that I was saying, well, he's this and this, but he had actually said something in that. You probably have had that experience where the person you're judging the harshest says something and you need it. And it's like, you go like, oh, fuck. Now I've got to put my judgment down in order to receive this wisdom that I need. And it's like, it was just so powerful. But to realize, you know, we're all a mess.
Yeah.
How's that for a summary statement?
I like that. That works. That works. I can identify with that.
That's all right. Yeah, it's a work in progress, and it's a laboratory. I said laboratory before, but it's a place where we get to practice the stuff we're talking. Especially, and I see this is one of the things I love about our work with emotional sobriety, because we understand when we're in a program of addiction recovery. I mean, we understand, we practice those. You know, some of those principles are, you know, we can differ with how people put things across there, but the behavioral stuff is straight ahead. It's like, it has to do with not doing some things and doing other things, you know, working even behavioral stuff in the program of working, you know, have you gone through the steps? Have you worked the step with your sponsor? Have you done those kinds of things? What we're talking about with emotional sobriety is richer, deeper, more. It's messier, I guess. I'll go back to my word. It's like, but we're practicing it with each other, hopefully.
Patrick, I want to come back to what you were saying. I interrupted your thought in the middle when you were talking about this idea.
No, I didn't think you interrupted me. What I was, I guess, trying to get at is how does one be connected to a group and their support system without, losing touch with themselves and without kind of falling into kind of a codependent type of pattern. I think I'm always trying to do that. I'm always trying to listen to myself, and I'm always trying to keep the project of rewiring, trying to keep that on track. But at the same time, like I can't be thinking about myself all day, and in fact, that's part of the key, right, to healing, is to realize that there's something bigger than you. And so I just figure there's a lot of contradictory it's like it's a contradictory model. It's a model that's full of contradictions, right? The path to recovery of support systems probably factor largely into that.
And I would say, if we're playing with words a little bit, I would say seemingly contradictory things. But a lot of times what we find is that they're not contradictory. They actually may be complementary if we make room for everything. One of the things I think that we do with emotion, I mean, just in growing up, but emotional sobriety is we really do work to put down that all or none model of thinking that most of us have grown up with. Is it this or is it that? This either orness of life. In what way do I feel angry about this? In what way do I feel guilty about this? If life was an essay test, what question are you working on right now? It's like, because these are most of them are essays. We need to be, these are subjective things. This is why I like the idea of calling this the next frontier, as Bill Wilson did, because it's about exploration, and it's not necessarily getting, answers they're not answers that we can check in the back of the book. They're answers that we're going to try to see how they feel for us. We're going to try them on.
And I think this is why my favorite recovery guys, they're very 12-step. The 12 steps have taught them a lot and get them to a point where they can be more open and flexible. And, I think that like the 12 steps are kind of like, even though it's something you return to and practice throughout your life, it's really just kind of like the opening salvo to like whatever the next step is. That's kind of the work that you guys are doing.
We're always building on it. Yeah, we're not stopping. It's like we've all known people. Now I'm gonna actually sound like I am one of those people. I just realized I've got a guy in my head that's just going, okay, well, you're getting ready to make a criticism of generally a group of people, and you're gonna demonstrate it by being exactly like them. But I'm gonna do it anyway, and that is people. So you guys are in charge of bringing me to back to some sanity. It's like the old, to me, it's the traditional old AA guy that has all the answers. There was a guy here in Nashville that for years, it's like, and you can say this, everybody would know who I was talking about, and much loved man, a lot of wonderful recovery, helped so many people. But he would very frequently begin, when he was sharing in a meeting, he would say, well, I can't play God, but yeah. And you go like, all right, here we go. God is getting ready to speak.
Yeah, whenever you say I can't do this, and then you go ahead, the next thing out of your
but
me too. Hey, I don't want to be like this, and then all of a sudden you're like that. I mean, it's
yeah. Well, we talk that way. It's like, now listen, I don't want to offend you, but it's anyway. What I was saying is those guys that basically, I tell you, the thing that used to, the guy, I never thought about this until just now, but it's like the thing that got me, I think, initially with some people when I was fairly early in the program, but had been around a while, people who had been in the program for a really long time and still insisted on referring to themselves as sick.
Yeah.
You can't trust me because I'm a sick alcoholic. And I remember thinking as a young man at the time going, what you just told me you've been in here 30 years. What have you been doing, for those 30 years? And it's like, and in maybe some ways they were telling the absolute truth about themselves. But I think in some ways we were talking about self-esteem a lot on the Thursday night meeting. It's like, in some ways, I think that's a self-esteem issue. I don't think they had a very accurate view of even their own progress.
Right.
So that's one of the things support system is. It's a mirror. If you pay attention, we will reflect back things that may be a problem, but we also reflect back, and this is very often for a lot of people in this program pursuing emotional sobriety, we're also going to reflect back what you're doing right, what you're doing that's good, what you're doing is solid. Beware of false humility, beware of overconfidence. But as you become competent about anything, there is not only a right, but a responsibility to feel confident. And that's part of recovery too. I'm going to get that in relationship with people. To do that, to be isolated in my own thinking and not interacting with other people, not putting this stuff out there, not practicing it, I'm not going to have any information.
So one thing before I gotta go, you guys keep talking.
Okay. Yeah.
I gotta run to go get my shots. I'm gonna get my senior flu shot, 60 over, plus my booster for my COVID. So it's my second booster, and I'm a bit nervous about it. So, but what I was gonna say is be aware, because one of the things about emotional sobriety is the practice of using our awareness to identify our emotional dependence. See how that shows up when you're going to meetings. Pay attention to how that may show up for you in your relationship to members of the group, to the group itself. That'd be my last thing. Always be aware that wherever we go, we're like Charlie Brown. We take ourselves with us. That's what Lucy said. Lucy had her psychiatric booth up one day. Charlie comes up and he's so frustrated with everybody playing tricks on Charlie Brown and says, Lucy, I've had it. I'm done. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to move. I got a ticket. I'm going to a different place. And Lucy looks at him and says, well, there's only one problem. He goes, what's that, Lucy? You're still going to be Charlie Brown.
Wherever you go.
I'll see
you.
All
right. Hey, we'll check on you later as it's your support system.
Please.
Okay.
The last thing we can do is we can tell our audience to check in with us at the Secular AA conference next weekend. We're going to be doing a live version of Emotional Sobriety.
Oh, yeah.
And 10:30 a.m. Pacific time to noon Pacific. So it's a 90-minute window. I'll be sure and put that information in the show notes, along with the URL and any relevant info. And it's going to be just a great time because we all like Joe. And this is going to be kind of an expanded version of what we do every week on the podcast.
10:30 to noon Pacific or
Pacific. Yep. 10:30 to noon Pacific. Hey, I'm really grateful to have you as part of my support system, man.
Right back at you. You've been so helpful to me in lots of ways, and I love having you as a friend.
Right on, man. Well, until next week.
Tend your life, tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.